Two down here in the bottom of the ninth. And Kenley's 0-1 runner going again. And swinging a little fly ball into right field. Abreu's very deep. Coming in now. He is there to make the catch. And the Red Sox win another one. 7-4, the final score today. They go 5-1 on this road swing between Toronto and Cincinnati, and now it's back home to Boston.
Yeah, another series that they take down, and tell you what, they're putting it together and doing all the things that they need to do at the right times. Had the 4-run inning in the fourth, and then the 3-run inning in the sixth, and that was enough to push this through.
Blue Jays next, back at Fenway.
Well, what do we have here? 2 more wins for the Red Sox over the weekend over the Cincinnati Reds. This is where we're going to begin tonight on the Baseball Hour, because guess what? Guess what? Right now, the Red Sox are in. Right now, the Red Sox are in. That's right, in the postseason. If the season ended today, and you're almost halfway through now, 42-36. Red Sox are a season-high 6 games over 500, 78 games in. That is a winning percentage of .538. I'm going to do the math real quick here while I figure that out. 42 wins. Okay, so we're going to figure that out. 42-36 times. They are on pace for 87.2 victories, which would get them in the postseason. And if the season ended today, the Red Sox would face the Minnesota Twins in the first round in the miniseries. First round, Red Sox and Twins. That's what you would get if the season ended today, and the season's not even half over yet. 617-779-0985 is your number on the Baseball Hour. Here is what I want to ask you today. And again, if you've been watching the Red Sox of late, let me just tell you, they're playing pretty well. And they're playing an exciting brand of baseball. And there are some certain players right now that have an energy to their game that whose play is infectious, is probably a good way to describe it. There are guys to look at on this Red Sox team and say, you know what? They're better than I thought. They're more entertaining than I thought. More exciting than I thought. They're getting contributions from all over the place. The pitching overall still pretty good. Has flattened out a little bit over the last, call it, couple of months, but nonetheless pretty good. So here's my question. Okay, well, before I even do that, let me say this. I'm going to get to a question, but I want to read to you something from Alex Spear in the Boston Globe over the weekend. And I say this because Alex, I think, is as good as anybody that there is on the beat, and also offers a vantage point that is consistent with how the game operates now, not to mention the fact that the owners of the Red Sox own the Globe. So I always do wonder whether there is some sort of connection by some of the things Alex Spear writes, and I don't mean that as a criticism of him, but is he having conversations with people in ownership that are connected to the Globe? Is there somebody planting thoughts in his head or discussions he's having that are leading to story ideas? I wonder all of that. Here's the headline on Alex Spear's story in the Boston Globe on Saturday. And now this was before, I think I have to actually go back. I think this was on Friday. Okay, so it might have been Friday night that this story first appeared. But the Red Sox had not played any games with the Cincinnati Reds yet, and they had not won the 2 out of 3 in that series that they did ultimately win. The headline on the story is, are the Red Sox positioning themselves to beat the odds? Are the Red Sox positioning themselves to beat the odds? So let me read a little bit of this to you, because you'll get the idea here momentarily. And then I'll have a question. Craig Breslow, writes Alex Spear, cares about the odds. The Red Sox chief baseball officer has made it clear that in evaluating whether to buy or sell at the trade deadline, the data-determined probability of reaching the postseason will play a significant role. Okay, I'm going to read that again. Breslow has made it clear that in evaluating whether to buy or sell at the deadline, the data-determined probability of reaching the postseason will play a significant role. So when he has to sit there with his staff and decide whether or not, what are we going to do, guys? Are we going to add or are we going to subtract at this deadline? What are we going to do? The playoff odds are going to matter. And Alex Spear writes, the odds are starting to tell an interesting story. Earlier this week, in the middle of their 3-game sweep of the Blue Jays, the Red Sox playoff chances, as determined by Fangraphs, stood at 37%. Their best mark of the season and nearly matching their 2023 high water mark of 38%. Okay, so according to Fangraphs during the Blue Jays series, the Red Sox got a 38% chance of making the playoffs, or climbed to a 37% chance of making the playoffs. Last year, the highest they got was 38. They then won 2 games against the Reds. Now they're at home against the Blue Jays. Tanner Houck is on the mound and has been their best pitcher all year long. So Jimmy Stewart, first let me say this. They're at 37%. 38% was as high as last year's team got. Last year's team did not add at the deadline, as we all know. So they're going to have to get higher, I think, than 37%. Now, Jimmy, how high do they have to get?
My guess would be 75%.
75%?
Yeah.
75? They're not going to get to 75. That's not going to happen.
But that's the percentage chance that I think that the Red Sox would need to actually make an impact move at the trade deadline.
Okay.
I think at 50%, you're looking at like Hans Robles for the bullpen. At 75, it's like, oh, let's go get a starter. Let's go get a right-handed bat. But for them to make a substantial move of impact to go for the postseason, I think it needs to be 75%.
Okay. So that becomes the first question. Regardless of what their playoff chances are now, and they were 37%, they might actually be a little higher now. Maybe there's a way we can look that up.
I have them, as far as Baseball Reference is concerned, at 40% chance to make the playoffs.
Okay, I would guess that they're a little higher because, again, this was at the beginning of the Red Series. They have since won 2 games. And these playoff chances, they fluctuate with every win and loss. So it doesn't surprise me that they're up to 40%. Right now, by the way, they're in. Not only are they in, they're the second wild card, not the third. So again, if the playoffs started right now, they would open the playoffs. I take that back, against the Baltimore Orioles. I got that wrong. I said the Twins earlier. It's the Orioles. The Red Sox would open the playoffs against the Orioles. Now, Alex Spear also writes this. There is danger in overreacting at a time when a team is hot. And the Red Sox have been hot. They're 9-3 in their last 12. So this is a little surge. The question is, are they really a team that is 6 games over 500, which is a high water mark for the season? Or is this just the peak during a hot streak, and now there's going to be, for lack of a better term, market correction that gets them back closer to 500, which is really where they have been all year long? Spear writes, after all, the dominance of the pitching staff in the early part of the season has leveled off. It is now roughly middle of the pack since the beginning of May, a 4.03 ERA, which is 17th in the major leagues. So for the last 6 weeks, the pitching staff has been average. But Spear concludes, it is worth asking, is there a reason to think the Sox are capable of developing players in the big leagues in a way that shifts their outlook for the season? And let me put that to you in layman's terms. In other words, have we gotten to a point here in the year where, because of the improvement in Tanner Houck, Connor Wong, Jarren Duran, just to throw a few names out there, the contributions of Tyler O'Neill, and I would say that O'Neill's performance overall has been pretty consistent when he's been in there, knowing what Rafael Devers is, that when you now look at the Red Sox, is it different than when you looked at them going into the season? Because Jarren Duran is, dare I say, an all-star candidate. Connor Wong is one of the more productive players in the big leagues at his position. When you add all that up, do you now have to recalibrate and look at the Red Sox and say, no, this is a playoff team? And if that's true, does that alter what you do at the deadline? Which leads me to the real question that I want to ask fans, because it does relate to how the Red Sox are going to approach this deadline. If they're going to approach it using data-driven analytics, a data-driven formula that says that your playoff chances are at 37%, and Craig Breslow is going to use that formula significantly, it is going to be a big factor weighing in his process to determine whether to buy or sell at the deadline. If that's how the Red Sox are going to do it, how would you do it? And I'm not asking whether you would buy or sell, because I know most of you would buy. That's not the part I'm interested in. I want to know if you are going to buy or if you're going to sell. I want to know why. That's what I want to know. Why? If you're going to buy, why? If you're going to sell, why? Because I do think there is something involved here regarding analytics and the people who believe on the analytics side versus the people who don't. So the analysts are going to go purely by the numbers. Craig Breslow is going to look at it and say, well, our playoff chances are 43%. That's not good enough for me, so I'm not going to add. I am interested in knowing where that break point is for Breslow and the Red Sox. Does it have to get over 50% for them to add? Does it have to be over 45%? Or as Jimmy Stewart said, does it have to get to 75%? At what point is the percentage high enough for the Red Sox to look at it and say, we're going to add? And in the other direction, if you are someone who wants to add, does that number factor into your thinking? You watching the team, you watching the game, why do you feel the way you feel? If you think you want to add, if you're going to buy at the deadline, tell me why. And if you're going to sell, tell me why. I'll give you my logic, my theory, my decision-making process. When we come back, 617-779-0985. I also want to touch on a couple of guys on the roster. I see a few of you lined up, by the way. We'll get to you right when we come back. I also want to get to a few of the guys on the roster that have something in common that should be obvious, and these are guys having good years for the Red Sox. Also more from the Spears story, which relates to those players, all coming up on the balance of the baseball hour.
This is the
And the Sox in front by 1.
Just incredible. I mean, this ball, as it's hit, you thought no chance because it just wasn't deep enough. But when you got Jarren Duran and the way he runs, everything's in play. There is not many guys that are scoring on that right there.
Bases are empty here in the bottom of the 9th inning and a 2-1. Fly ball center field. Duran backing up on the track at the wall, leaping up. He caught it! He caught the ball! 2 down. Duran doing it all today. 2 down in the 9th. Duran scaling the wall in center.
Yeah, that ball's out.
Yeah, that was heading out.
But I'll tell you, the Dom Smith ball carried better than I thought that ball was gone.
He took that one back.
Wall a little bit, but Duran did make it wasn't charged an error, I don't believe. I never looked at the box score to see whether it was officially an error. And but it was a play he could have made, should have made, a good outfielder makes. He didn't make it. So he still scares me a little defensively, but look, offensively, he's electrifying on the bases. No question. Hits the ball gap to gap, line to line, can take extra bases, manufacture runs all on his own, hit the ball out of the ballpark. There's a lot to like about Jarren Duran's offensive game. So I'm not going to dump all over him. But I will tell you that, again, I don't think he's perfect. I'm not sure. You can certainly argue he's having an all-star caliber season. I don't know if he's necessarily the kind of all-star player that I would vote for. But whatever, you can have your opinion on that. He's been a huge ad for the Red Sox. Huge. I don't think he should have been in the big league 2 years ago. It's as bad a guy I've seen play in the big leagues ever 2 years ago, which again, I don't put that on him. I put that on them. I'll get to more on Duran in a second, but I come back to the question I asked at the beginning of the show. Whether you want to add or subtract at the deadline is not what I'm interested in arguing with you tonight. I want to know why you choose what you choose. If you add, why? If you want to subtract, if you want to sell, why? Tell me why. And by the way, there's no right or wrong answer. Martin in Texas. Martin, go ahead.
Hey, Tony. I would simply buy because I think this team's a good right-handed top-of-the-order bat and a starting pitcher away from being able to make the kind of noise they did in 2021. But the problem with that is they can't go and get someone like Pete Alonso because of Yoshida's contract holding up the lineup, and the outfield is so crowded. It kind of limits the offensive players they can get, and I don't know what they're willing to give up.
Okay, so again, but your point, Martin, is you think they're good enough to invest in. You judge that on your eyeballs and everything else. I'll take as many details as people can give me on this particular topic. So Martin says, they're a starting pitcher and a right-handed bat away from being able to make a run at it. He might be right. The right-handed bat to me would be one of the biggest ones, by the way, I'll say, because their starting pitching overall has been pretty good, and Cora has found a way to mix and match with that bullpen. And if you're going to get Liam Hendriks added to the group, and I'm not telling you I think Hendriks is going to be good, but when I say added, I mean added. You don't trade Kenley Jansen, you add Liam Hendriks. Now there's a chance that you're picking up a quality reliever to go along with a right-handed bat in the lineup. I'll take my chances. I'll take a shot with that. And Cora being able to mix and match, I like what I've seen. I think this team's got an ability to score runs in multiple ways. They can generate offense with their speed. They hit the ball gap to gap. There's some doubles power up and down the lineup. And they can hit the ball out of the ballpark well enough. I'm not telling you they're great. But you put a right-handed bat in the middle of that lineup between Casas and Devers, I like what they look like. Especially if it's someone like Vladimir Guerrero. But I, too, like Martin, question whether the Red Sox are going to be willing to give up what it takes to do something like that. And my gut tells me they won't. Patrick in Charlestown. Patrick, go ahead.
Tony, imagine if they had given Yoshida kind of the Rusney Castillo treatment and before the season started had brought on Hernandez for the DH position and Montgomery for the rotation, where the heck we would be now. I wish.
Okay, so Patrick hung up. I mean, we can certainly look back on that and say, if Montgomery and Hernandez were here, Teoscar Hernandez, who's been with the Dodgers, how much better would they be? And they'd be better. Definitely. Now, I don't know if Hernandez is here. Does that mean Tyler O'Neill isn't? I'd prefer to have both. Maybe move O'Neill to left field from time to time when you move Duran around, what have you. But then you get Wilyer Abreu as well. So there's some moving pieces there. I'm still interested in knowing, though, if you want to add. This is a big one for me. If you're a fan out there and you want to add, tell me why, and don't just tell me because I like the team. What about the team would inspire you to add? Jimmy Stewart, you have an opinion on this? If you were to add, why would you add?
I do. I would add because for the main reason of you're in the playoffs today, so I want to go for it and see how the run can end up if adding a starting pitcher, a right-handed bat, another bullpen arm, something like that. But what I would do is I would tactically add a player with term. Vlad Guerrero Jr. makes a lot of sense to me. If you can get Pete Alonso with an extension. So I'm not only adding for this playoff run, but I'm adding for future potential playoff runs.
Okay.
But I'm always in the mindset of to add, because if you have a chance to go for it, you should go for it.
Okay. So again, it's a generally aggressive approach is what you're telling me. Here is ultimately, and I'm going to try to treat it just with regard to this year's team. When I look at them, have I gotten to the point where I believe that they're worth investing in? And my answer is yes. And I'll tell you why. I think Jarren Duran's legit. Offensively, he's legit. Jarren Duran can run. He's got power. He's spraying the ball all over the field. When I watch him play, hard guy to defend. I would tell you that David Hamilton at the top of the lineup with Duran gives the Red Sox a dimension that I don't think they've ever had. I think combined, maybe one of you guys can add this up. I looked this up quickly. What are they, like 43 for 46? Those two guys in stolen bases, Jarren Duran and David Hamilton. Hamilton's 21 of 22 or 20 of 21. Duran's like 20 of 23 or 23 of 26.
No, you got it right. It's 41 combined and only 4 caught stealings.
Okay, 41 of 45 combined, those two guys at the top of the lineup. I know Devers can hit for power. Tyler O'Neill, I think, as long as he's in the lineup, is pretty consistent. When you get into injuries, to me, you sort of got to throw that out. Everybody's worried about injuries. You have to sort of operate under the premise that the team you have is the team you have, and if they stay healthy, what am I going to get? I believe in Wilyer Abreu. I think he's pretty good. Not great, pretty good. Connor Wong, did you know, is ranked number 1 in the majors in OPS among catchers with 220 plate appearances. 220 is not a low number. He doesn't officially qualify for the batting title at the moment, which is not unusual for a catcher. But 220 plate appearances through 76 games is going to be 450, approaching 500 if he plays more for a catcher, which is not ridiculous. It's not absurdly low is my point. It's a full season. Wong has been the best catcher offensively in the big leagues based on OPS. I believe in Wong. I think Wong has actually reached... Wong had flashes last year. He was pretty good. Now, will he fade? Will he fade in September, August, because he's not that big and the workload of catcher could wear him down? Maybe. So that's something to think about. I don't know if Kyle Teal's going to be here in September or not. Maybe you give him a few at bats in September to get his feet wet because he's going to factor in next year. They're starting pitching. I think Tanner Houck is legit. I said this early in the year. The delivery is simplified. The stuff has been consistent. He's not walking people. Looks like a different guy. Dante and Linfield. Dante, what do you got?
Yeah, so first off, Maz, what I think they will do, I don't think they're going to buy. I'm with Jimmy. I think it's going to take like that 75% kind of level for them to actually invest. I think if they see anything, it'll be a kid from the minor leagues. But to answer your question, right, what I think they should do and why, I think they should buy because we talked about this before. You should be able to do both, i.e. build for the future and buy, right? And we are uniquely positioned to get a guy like Garrett Crochet and add to him a controllable asset.
Okay, Dante, you're starting to break up. Oh, sorry, I lost you. If you want to call back. You were breaking up, so I let you go. I guess what I'm telling you is this. I would prefer controllable assets too. Those typically are going to cost more. So Vladimir Guerrero is going to cost you more. You're going to get him for more than just a rental. You're going to get him for a year and a half, which I'm fine with. They need a good right-handed bat for the middle of the lineup. The question is, what are you going to give Toronto to get him? Are the Red Sox willing to trade some of these prospects that they have in their system to get some of these pieces? Now, I can give you names of guys that I would trade. For example, Nick York got promoted to AAA recently. Okay, Nick York is having a pretty good year. I don't love Nick York. You've got Vaughn Grissom already to play second base. If you have to, you can play Rafaela at shortstop. I don't think Nick York's a shortstop either. And besides, you have Meyer. So you've got enough infielders there where you shouldn't need Grissom or Nick York. One of those guys should be tradable. You should be able to get something for one of those assets. You've obviously got second baseman, call them middle infielders, but second baseman in abundance. You have a surplus. You should be able to move one of those pieces and get some help.
And with Vladimir Guerrero, Tony, he's only 25 years old. So that's a type of player that you bring him in here, he does well, and then if you need to extend him for a 10-year contract, it's only through age 36. So that's a good deal. That's the Rafi Devers theory, is that 25, 26 is the age where you will sign somebody to that 10-year contract.
And here's the other thing I would throw in there too, Jimmy, in terms of who they want to add. Maybe you can get a player by taking on some money. So, for example, when the Red Sox traded for Josh Beckett, they took on Mike Lowell. Lowell ended up being still a good player. I think he knocked in 120 runs.
Won the World Series MVP.
And he won the World Series MVP, as Jimmy pointed out. But on top of that, you took on money to give up a little less in the trade. You gave them Hanley Ramirez, but you got Josh Beckett and a third baseman who could still play defense and ended up being a great ad for you. So can you do something like that? Even if he's not a great player, let's say you take on money and it allows you to get Vladimir Guerrero for a cheaper price. Could you do that? So the Red Sox need to be creative here. And if they don't want to give up their assets, then take on some money. But I would add, for all the crap that I have been kicking out of this team all year long, I am pleasantly surprised. Houck is for real, I think. I'm just giving you my opinion. I'm not going by playoff odds. According to what they are on Fangraphs, and I'll tell you why when we come back on the Baseball Hour. Kevin Majori's got your headlines. If you're on the line, don't go anywhere.
Sports Up.
His swing and a drive, sucked into left field. Steer turning around. Kiss that one goodbye. Connor Wong with his 7th. And the Sox take a 2-0 lead. And that, my friends, is a 13-game hitting streak.
Yeah, Jarren Duran and Connor Wong coming in both with 12-game hitting streaks, and they both extended for the halfway point in this game.
Some big leaguers now. Maybe the upside's a little higher than people guessed. But I would also tell you that, remember, because they're the age they are, you're not likely to get a lot more out of them. They're probably pretty close to their peak right now. Whereas if you get a guy who's a real prospect and he's 24 and he's playing like this, Wilyer Abreu, for example, and you say Wilyer Abreu early in the year was playing well, there's more value in Wilyer Abreu because he's 24 and he's still got room to grow. Wong and Duran have to be pretty close to their peak. So these are the kind of guys you look at and say, well, they're not eligible for arbitration for a couple of years. Or, let me rephrase, free agency for a couple of years. You might be better off just paying them 1-year deals for 3 years and then see you later, move on, we're not going to pay you. Which brings me to this. This was another thing in the Alex Spear story, talking about how the Red Sox have developed these young players. And he says, the Red Sox have done this in such a way that raises a question that can blow up projection systems. What if they can excel? What if the Red Sox can excel at developing players in the big leagues? So again, Jarren Duran 2 years ago in the big leagues looked like a freaking A-ball player. Now people are talking about him for the All-Star game. All of this is fine. But my problem with it is, why are the Red Sox developing players in the big leagues at all? Jarren Duran should not have been in the big leagues 2 years ago. He should have been developing in the minor leagues. The Red Sox should not be sacrificing wins at the major league level to develop Jarren Duran in the big leagues. This is where the Chaim Bloom model failed, and failed miserably. They needed to have better options available to them in the big leagues than the guys they had up at that time. That was really what's the word I'm looking for? Injustice to the fan base, a spit in the face to the fan base. You deserve better than Jarren Duran losing the ball in the sky and giving up an inside the park grand slam to the Blue Jays like they did. Not to mention you put Jarren Duran in an unwinnable situation, let alone Connor Wong or anybody else. Those guys really weren't ready for the big leagues. So, do some guys develop at the big league level? Of course. When the good prospects get here, they're going to develop. It's going to take a little while. Dustin Pedroia was not a stud the moment he walked in the door. Neither was Jacoby Ellsbury. But if you have a good team, you can carry them, put them at the bottom of the lineup. When you have these guys on a team that doesn't have sufficient big league talent, you're now asking them to be key contributors. It's unfair to the player. It's not the best way to develop. Let me just say quickly, too, when I say, if you're going to add, then we'll get right to your calls. If you're going to add at the deadline, why are you going to add? I need a why. I just don't want to hear, because you're in it, you're good. No, tell me why. What do you see that makes you say it's worth it? Because if it's not worth it, with this kind of team, you are better off holding on to your assets and gearing up for next year. I know that sucks, but that's how they'll argue it. Matt McCarthy texted in. And one of the things I love about McCarthy and Milliken is that, first of all, they're young people who like the sport. And then secondly, beyond that, they will listen and say, oh, by the way, here's something else. So McCarthy says, here are some reasons to add. 1, getting to the playoffs would be a great lesson and experience for this young core. True. That's how you develop. The first time in the playoffs, there might be some pressure. You don't know how to handle it. But the second time through, you'll be better off. So if it's true that you can gain experience in the regular season, why can't you gain it in the postseason? 2, McCarthy writes surplus. You're about to run out of room. And then he lists infield and outfield. The middle infield that the Red Sox have right now in terms of potential big league talent or established big league talent, Trevor Story, Marcelo Meyer, David Hamilton, Vaughn Grissom, Nick York, and Manuel Valdez. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players. 2 starters, maybe an extra infielder in there. There's 2 or 3 guys on that list that you should be able to move. Maybe you think Valdez is a DH. You can take him out of there, which leaves you with 5. That still leaves you with 2 to trade. And in the outfield, Duran, Abreu, Anthony, Rafaela. That's 4. Again, you still have Yoshida, too. Maybe he's a DH, but you get the idea. You don't have pitching to trade, but you do have surplus. Jacob is in a car. Jacob, what do you got?
Hey, it's going. So I wanted to ask, currently, is Masataka Yoshida on the bench? Because there are a lot of players that are hitting better than him that are currently in the lineup.
Yeah, I think, Jacob, we can chalk that one up right now to a crappy signing. That's what it was. Bad signing. The Red Sox overpaid him because, again, they tried to be smarter than everybody else and went for someone on the market that other teams are undervaluing. So they gave him $18 million a year. They called him an outfielder. He's really a DH. So they paid $18 million for a DH. And I keep coming back to this, and I'm not going to let it go. The year before, Kyle Schwarber got $19 million as a DH, and the Red Sox wouldn't pay him. Who would you rather have as your DH, Kyle Schwarber or Masataka Yoshida?
And Kyle Schwarber, by the way, played more games in left field than Yoshida did last year.
So it's not even close. So this is one of those those are the kinds of decisions that make people look at you and say, as a baseball operation, that you're clueless. If you're going to sign a guy that couldn't play the outfield, and we can all look at Yoshida now and say that should have been an easy call. Why not just sign Schwarber when you know he can hit in the big leagues? Even if the average is low, he'll hit the ball 450 feet enough for you to not give a crap. Ron in Texas. Hey, Ron.
Hey, Tony, if you can give me a second, we'll scatter in, but I've got it organized now. A landscape kind of dictates the market in this situation. We're about 6th or 7th, I think, in runs scored. We're only half the league is above 500 and with run differential on top of it, but we're right in the mix. I feel like we need to add a second baseman, though. I know we got Vaughn Grissom there. I don't think he's a major league quality player. And you're going after Vlad, and that's the name I'm hearing. I'm thinking more of a Bichette style. I want somebody who can fill the middle infield, who can float around. I don't want another DH on this team. I got Tristan Cassis coming up, who Tyler thinks he's the next Ted Williams, and we don't get that situation either right now. But I feel like a Nick Pivetta-style pitcher, maybe you kind of strike gold on somebody with an expiring contract that's expensive that we can bring in.
Okay, Ron, I'm going to let you go just because, again, I'm just trying to get to other people, so I don't want to get into too long, convoluted theories about what to do, who to add. But I like your idea. The fact that the league is weak is another reason why you should be looking to add. The league is vulnerable. If you can finish with 86, 87 wins, you might be able to get in. That's enough. And if you fortify your team and can pick up a couple of wins in the second half, now you can win 87, 88 games. Get in with Tanner Houck. Who the hell knows if you got a good bullpen? Here's the other thing. The chances of making the playoffs stat, playoff probability stat, that's the last reason to invest in your team. Because, again, I would love to know specifically what those metrics are based on. And let me give you the classic example for why they mean garbage. And this is just within the last few years. In 2021, the Atlanta Braves, according to research done by Charlie, our intern back there, Charlie looked it up. The 2021 Braves, to make the playoffs, starting the season, 64%. By July 10th, when they were 500, they were 44-44, and at that point, Ronald Acuna Jr. had torn his ACL and was out for the year. July 10th, their percentage odds of making the playoffs were 8.7%. Again, before the year, 64. By July 10th, 8.7%. The day before the trade deadline, they had a 9.8% chance of making the playoffs. If Craig Breslow had been the general manager of that Braves team and saw the 9.8%, he would have said, no way am I investing in that team. The Braves went in the other direction. At that deadline, they added Jock Peterson, Jorge Soler, Eddie Rosario, Adam Duvall. The day after the trade deadline, their playoff chances had basically doubled, not quite, to 16.7%. Their chances of winning the World Series were at 1%. I don't need to tell you that they won the whole thing. And the guys they picked up at the deadline filled their holes, all played well for them. They became a better team. They won it.
Soler was the MVP of the World Series, I believe.
So the analysts love to tell you, well, if you look at the history of the trades made at the deadline, very few of them have an impact. The Braves made 4 of them. Lost their best player to an injury and still won the World Series. Their odds before the trade deadline were between 9% and 10%. The Red Sox currently are at 37. And you know what the Red Sox are going to say? The Braves were an outlier.
By the way,
so why even try? Go ahead, Jimmy.
Also worth noting that the Red Sox in 2018 acquired Nathan Eovaldi and Steve Pearce.
Who had a
Both
huge
were
impact.
instrumental in the Red Sox winning a World Series. In fact, Steve Pearce was the MVP, which made you some coin.
Absolutely. And again, and Eovaldi was terrific for them in October.
But that's the outlier.
So again, do you want to if you have a good team, do you want to absorb some risk or not?
No.
Because I have news for you. If you're an analyst or you're in the Red Sox camp on this and what the odds are, if you just play in the odds, you'll never gamble on anything. You will never win. You'll never win. So grow a pair, grow some balls, and when your team earns it, reward them and take a shot. Maybe it's a calculated risk, but take a shot, grow some balls. Connor's in Katua. Go ahead, Connor.
Hey, Maz, you kind of already answered my question, but Yoshida, I don't see where he fits at all, and you're not going to get anything for him. What do you do with him?
Right now, you bury him. Okay, I don't know what you do. You bury him. He's a bench player. He's a pinch hitter, or who knows? He'll help you at some point. Not $18 million worth. He'll do something at some point.
He still last year hit 290 in the big leagues. Like, that should be valued for something.
So he does have some value as a hitter. Again, there's not enough power there. But, he can hit close to 300, hit you some doubles. And the OPS is going to be under 800 because he just doesn't hit for enough power when he does hit it. So he's not a complete zero, but he's not really a starter on a championship team, and he's not versatile enough to be a good bench player.
But the thing is, he's not a Breslow guy. And that's the problem, is that even though he's a talented player who hit you 290 last year, well, it's not my guy, so I can't have him here.
So you know what? He does have 3 more years.
Close-minded thinking.
He's got 3 more years left, Jimmy, which tells me they're probably not going to cut bait with him just yet because there's too much money tied into him. So they'll find some way to bury him on the bench. Tell you what, when we come back, don't go anywhere if you're on the line. We'll do a lightning round. We'll take all your calls and wrap it up on the baseball hour.
get him on the cheap.
Good question. Very quick call. Nice job. I'm not against the idea. Particularly as Jimmy Stewart said, I'm not exactly thrilled about what Brian Bayo has done. The Red Sox could use another starter. Ideally, I would like a left-hander. It would be something if they brought in Jordan Montgomery, but I'm open to just about anything. Unless there's information out there that says Bauer's a real dirtball, and that, that's a totally different thing. John in Acton. John, what do you got?
Yeah, I want to see them buy because we want to see some meaningful games in September. It'll help the young roster develop, and I want to see if Breslow has some balls. And how about someone like Hunter Renfroe? Maybe the Kansas City will give him up because he's not really playing well out there, and you know what you get from him if he comes to the Red Sox.
Okay, I don't love Renfroe. They can do better than that in the lineup. I want a better hitter than that. Hunter Renfroe to me is an easy guy to pitch to, but we're on the same page. Send a message to the clubhouse. And let's face it, the Red Sox could use some goodwill from the fan base. And if you get into the playoffs and there's postseason baseball here, you tell me that's not a good thing? Brian in Texas. Brian, go ahead.
Tony, thank you. One very simple reason why we should be buyers, my friend, because we're the Boston effing Red Sox. We're sniffing a wild card spot, and we should never, ever be out of the top 10 in payroll in Major League Baseball. Thank you.
Brian, couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more. Just to reclaim your identity. And I'm not telling you it's number one on the list. But just, can you do something for your fan base? The team is surprised. Okay, the team has surprised. They've hung in there. They're playing hard. I do wonder, maybe this is a topic for tomorrow, Jimmy. I do wonder whether a good year could affect the Cora story. And I'm not talking about whether Cora would stay. I'm talking about how the Red Sox would approach it. But I'll tell you what, let's put that aside for the moment. We'll get into that tomorrow. Along with, I told you, some other guys on the Red Sox that I think have something in common that are worth looking at. I think it's obvious, but we'll touch on that tomorrow as well. And whatever happens in tonight's game. Kevin Majori's Get Your Headlines. We'll catch you tomorrow on the Baseball Hour.